Halima's second-hand heel snapped just as the laughter began. She stumbled in the center of the school courtyard, her faded dress catching the harsh afternoon light, while phones lifted around her like weapons. Zuena's voice rang out first, sweet and cruel, asking whether Halima had come to the reunion to beg for leftovers or clean up after successful people. More laughter followed. Someone shoved a paper cup into Halima's hand. Someone else told her to earn her dinner. Then the black luxury car rolled through the gates. It did not stop for the rich girls. It stopped for Halima. And when the uniformed driver stepped out, bowed slightly, and opened the rear door for her, the entire courtyard forgot how to breathe. Before we go on, tell me honestly, if someone you once looked down on suddenly rose in front of your eyes, would you feel shame or jealousy? And where are you watching from today? Drop your country and your local time in the comments. If you love emotional stories filled with shocking twists, justice and healing, subscribe and stay with me. 3 days before the reunion, Halima had woken before dawn to the sound of her mother coughing behind the thin curtain that divided their one-room home. The room was still dark. Rain tapped softly against the metal roof. Somewhere outside, a motorcycle sputtered past, then faded into the sleeping neighborhood. Halima lay still for one breath, then another, staring at the ceiling where an old water stain had spread like a map of a country no one wanted. She already knew what the day would demand before it had properly begun. Medicine, rent, bread, transport fare, patience, strength, silence. She rose without a sound. The floor was cold beneath her feet. She tied her scarf, lit the small stove, and set water to boil while counting coins in her palm. Not enough. Again. Never enough. She closed her fingers slowly over the coins, as if pressure alone might multiply them. Behind the curtain, another cough tore through the quiet. Halima moved at once. "Mama Asha, I'm fine," the older woman called in the thin, stubborn voice Halima knew too well. "Stop looking at me like I'm already halfway to the grave." Halima pushed the curtain aside anyway. Mama Asha sat propped against 2 flattened pillows, one hand pressed to her chest, the other searching for dignity in the folds of a faded wrapper dress. Age had bent her back and thinned her arms, but her eyes were still sharp, still warm, still embarrassingly alive. That was the hardest part. She looked like a woman the world had tried to break many times and failed to finish. "You were coughing all night," Halima said. "And you were pretending to sleep all night." Mama Asha gave her a look. "Which means neither of us won." Halima tried not to smile, but it came anyway. That was how it had always been. Even in pain, Mama Asha guarded the room against despair, as if it were an intruder that needed to be insulted until it left. "I'll make tea," Halima said, "and you'll go to work." "I know. And you'll stop cutting my tablets in half." At that, Halima turned away to hide the guilt on her face. Mama Asha saw it anyway. "I raised you," she said quietly. "Do not insult me with lies." Halima busied herself with adjusting the blanket. "You need to eat before you take them. I need my full dose before my chest begins fighting God." Halima inhaled slowly. "I'll buy more today." With what Halima did not answer. She went back to the stove, poured tea into chipped enamel cups, and sliced the last piece of bread into 2 pieces, so unequal that the lie would look generous. She handed the larger one to Mama Asha. The older woman stared at it, then at her. "You think I don't know how hunger looks on your face?" Halima shrugged. "You also say I look too serious when I'm hungry. You do. And it is unattractive." Mama Asha took the bread. "A woman can be poor, but must she also look like a judge?" That made Halima laugh, a soft, quick sound that vanished almost as soon as it came. She sat on the edge of the bed and watched Mama Asha eat. The morning light had begun to slip through the cracks in the wall, turning the room from black to grey. In that colourless hour, their life looked exactly what it was. Small, strained, ordinary, held together by effort no one ever saw. But Halima had long ago stopped mistaking ordinary for weak. By 6 o'clock she was out the door. Her first job was at a roadside cafe near the bus station, where office workers wanted hot tea, fast hands, and no eye contact. By 9 she had carried trays, scrubbed tables, calmed a screaming toddler, while his mother took a phone call and silently endured 2 men who discussed her body as if she were furniture. She answered in short sentences, worked twice as fast as everyone else, and kept her face still. That stillness fooled people. They saw a quiet woman in a faded uniform and thought silence meant emptiness. They never noticed that Halima observed everything. Who paid late but lied confidently? Which suppliers watered down the milk? Which customer pretended not to recognize her from school? Which cashier skimmed small notes from the register and blamed the apprentice? Which women were cruel only when men were watching? Which men lowered their voices around wealth and sharpened them around poverty? Halima noticed. Halima remembered. At noon, during her short break, she sat behind the cafe with a plastic container of rice she had cooked the night before. Her phone buzzed in her lap. Unknown number. She almost ignored it, but something in her chest tightened before she even opened the message. It was an invitation card, photographed and sent without greeting. Al-Noor International Academy, 10-year reunion. Gala, Saturday, 4 p.m. Below the image came another message. We heard you're still alive. You should come. It'll be inspiring for everyone. A third message followed before she could block the number. Dress nicely if you can. No name. No signature. None was needed. Zuena. Halima stared at the screen until the words blurred. For a moment, the alley behind the cafe dissolved, and she was 17 again, standing in a polished hallway with cheap shoes and borrowed books, while laughter moved around her like smoke. She could almost smell the perfume of rich girls who had never repeated a dress in their lives. Could almost hear the sweet, poison-soft voice that had once called her sister in private and entertainment in public. Zuena. There had been a time when the name carried warmth. Shared lunches, shared secrets, shared notes under the desk. Then came scholarships, social climbing, and the slow discovery that some friendships broke, not because love was absent, but because ambition was stronger. Halima locked the phone and placed it face down on her knee. She should not go. She knew what the invitation really was. Not a reunion, not nostalgia. A stage. A trap decorated with fairy lights and expensive perfume. An evening designed to let successful people feel even more successful by standing near someone who had not escaped. Someone like her. Yet as she sat there, another face rose in her memory. Old Mr. Dyke, the retired literature teacher with trembling hands and patient eyes. The one man at that school who had treated Halima like a mind instead of a stain. 2 weeks earlier, she had heard from a former classmate that he was unwell, that he might attend the reunion for a short while because the school wanted to honor him. He had once slipped exam prep books into her bag and pretended not to notice when she returned them covered in tears. He had told her in a quiet, empty classroom that humiliation was not proof of inferiority, only proof that the humiliated had threatened something in the cruel. She had never forgotten that. Her thumb hovered over the screen. A shadow fell across her lunch. It was Seifu, the cafe's delivery boy, 17, and all elbows balancing a crate of soda bottles against one hip. You look like someone texted you news of a funeral. Halima slipped the phone away. Worse. Debt reunion. He winced. Rich people remembering poor people exist. That is always dangerous. She smiled faintly. Very wise for a boy who delivered bread to the wrong address twice yesterday. He grinned. I am wise, not magical. When he left, she took the phone out again. This time she zoomed in on the invitation image. Gold lettering. school crest, venue details, a list of sponsors at the bottom. One name caught her attention and held it. Adeyemi Lux Group. Halima frowned. That name had been everywhere recently, on billboards, in radio discussions, in the whispers of market women who knew more than newspapers ever printed. The founder had died years ago. The empire had grown bigger since then, and for the past month, people had been passing around rumors that the family behind the company was searching for someone. Not publicly, not officially, quietly. A missing heir, some said. A private inheritance war, said others. Most treated it like another rich people story, important because money made everything sound like prophecy. Halima had never cared, but now the name sat at the bottom of her reunion invitation like a thumb pressed into wet clay. Her pulse shifted. That evening, after her second job, mending garments in a tailor's back room, she stopped by the pharmacy. The amount on the medicine slip was higher than what she had managed to earn that day. She bought only half again. As the pharmacist packed the tablets, Halima felt the old familiar shame rise in her throat, hot and bitter. Not because she was poor, because poverty always made love look inadequate. When she reached home, Mama Asha was sitting outside on a stool, letting the last of the daylight warm her knees. Children ran past in the alley, chasing a punctured ball. Women gossiped over basins of laundry. Somewhere nearby, fried onions hissed in hot oil. "You're late," Mama Asha said. "You're outside. I have not escaped." Halima handed her the paper packet. Mama Asha felt its weight, and instantly knew. This is half. It will do for now. It will not. Halima sat beside her. For a few seconds, neither spoke. Then she said, "I got an invitation." Mama Asha snorted. "To paradise? To my school reunion?" That earned a long silence. Finally, Mama Asha asked, "Why to laugh?" "Yes," Mama Asha said. "That sounds like people." Halima looked down at her hands. "Mr. Dyke may be there." Mama Asha's face softened. She remembered him, too. The teacher who had once visited their home with a bag of books and spoken to Halima as if brilliance were not a crime. "You want to see him?" "Yes. You also want them to see that you survived." Halima said nothing. Mama Asha laughed once, dryly. "Good. Let them choke on it." Halima turned to her. "You think I should go? I think the world has spent too long choosing your fear for you." Mama Asha adjusted the wrapper over her knees. "Go if you are going for your own reason, not theirs. What if they humiliate me again?" Mama Asha looked at her for a long moment, the evening light touching every line on her tired face. "Then make sure you are standing when they finish," she said. "People who enjoy humiliation are always hoping to see somebody kneel." The words sank deep. That night, long after Mama Asha slept, Halima opened the small tin box she kept beneath their bed. Inside were folded receipts, emergency notes, 2 childhood photographs too blurred to trust, and one object wrapped in cloth. She unwrapped it slowly. A tarnished half-circle pendant lay in her palm, old metal worn smooth by years of skin. It was the only thing she had possessed before Mama Asha found her. No name, no date, no explanation. Just a piece of something clearly broken from a larger whole. Halima closed her fingers around it. Outside, thunder rolled far away. In the dark room, with her mother breathing weakly behind the curtain and the reunion invitation glowing coldly from her phone screen, Halima made her decision. She would go, not because Zuena had called, not because the rich wanted a spectacle, not even because the past deserved another chance. She would go because some doors opened only once and some truths waited behind humiliation, like fire waiting behind smoke. And somewhere inside her, a quiet instinct had begun to stir, the dangerous kind that did not yet know its own name. By the time Halima arrived at the reunion, the sun had not yet gone down, but the campus already looked like a place built for people who feared the ordinary. Strings of warm lights had been draped through the palm trees lining the courtyard. White fabric hung from polished arches. A live jazz trio played near the fountain, where students used to eat lunch and whisper secrets. Waiters in black uniforms carried shining trays of juice wine and tiny foods too delicate to satisfy hunger. Everywhere Halima looked, there was softness, wealth, and performance. The school that had once smelled of floor polish and authority now smelled of imported perfume and money that wanted to be noticed. She paused at the gate for half a second, not because she wanted to turn back, because she could already feel the eyes. A woman at the registration table glanced up, scanned Halima from head to toe, and smiled the brittle kind of smile reserved for people considered out of place. "Name," the woman asked. "Halima." The woman ran one painted fingernail down a list. Her brows lifted almost imperceptibly. Ah, that one sound carried more insult than an entire sentence. Halima signed her name, accepted the reunion badge without comment, and stepped into the courtyard. Music, laughter, glass clinking, heels on stone. And beneath it all the old rhythm of danger. It started the way cruelty often did, not loudly, not at first, but in ripples. A glance held too long. A whisper bent toward another whisper. A smile that arrived too quickly to be kind. Halima kept walking. She had chosen a simple blue dress bought second-hand and altered by her own careful hands. It was clean, modest, and elegant in the quiet way poor people understood. Elegance nothing wasted, nothing borrowed, nothing pretending to be more than it was. Her shoes were old, but polished. Her hair was wrapped neatly. The pendant lay beneath her collar, cold against her skin. She saw old faces everywhere. Some she barely remembered until they laughed. Some she remembered too well. A former prefect who used to confiscate her notebooks for inspection and return them with bent corners. Two girls who once pretended to invite her to a birthday dinner, only to leave her outside the restaurant with no money for the ride home. Boys who had found endless comedy in her lunchbox. Her accent, her silence, her refusal to flirt for protection. 10 years had changed their clothes, their voices, their jewelry. It had not changed their instincts. Halima, she turned. For one fragile second, relief touched her. Mr. Dyke stood a few steps away, thinner than she remembered, leaning slightly on a carved walking stick. Age had hollowed his cheeks and silvered his hair, but his eyes were the same gentle, watchful, sadder than before. He wore a dark suit that had clearly been pressed with care. He looked like a man attending his own memory. So Halima said softly. His face lit up. "So it is really you." She crossed to him at once. When he took her hands, his grip trembled, but it was warm. "I hoped you would come," he said. "You heard about me?" He smiled faintly. "A teacher hears many things. Very few of them are useful." That almost made her laugh. "You look tired," he added, lowering his voice. "I am." "Still standing, though?" She held his gaze. "Still standing." He nodded as if that answer mattered more than any resume. "Good." For a few minutes they spoke apart from the music and the crowd. He asked about her life without pity. She answered without performance. She told him she worked hard. He told her he had never doubted that. He spoke of books, of the death of attention in modern students, of the way power had made too many people lazy in soul. When he coughed, Halima instinctively reached for his elbow. He waved it off, embarrassed by weakness, and she pretended not to notice. Then his expression shifted. He glanced over her shoulder. Halima did not need to turn to know who had arrived. Zuena had always understood entrances. Even in school, she never simply walked into a room. She arranged her arrival the way some people arranged a photograph, every angle, calculated every detail, speaking before she did. 10 years had sharpened that instinct into something almost imperial. She wore ivory silk diamonds at her throat, confidence like a second skin. Her laughter carried before her body did. 2 women floated beside her. 3 men trailed behind her. Wherever she stepped, attention moved to make space. When her eyes found Halima, the smile on her face brightened instantly. Too instantly, Halima Zuena said, as if the name were a gift she had chosen to bestow. You came. Mr. Dyke's hand tightened slightly on his cane. Halima turned fully. You invited me. Zuena laughed, a sound soft enough to suggest affection to strangers, and sharp enough to slice old scars open. Yes, but invitations and appearances are not always the same thing. Life happens. She kissed the air near Halima's cheek without touching her. The perfume hit Halima a second before the memory did a school bathroom lipstick lie's betrayal wrapped in sweetness. It's been so long, Zuena went on. You look... Her gaze drifted over Halima's dress, paused on the shoes, returned to her face. Well, alive. Which is lovely. One of the women beside her giggled. Mr. Dyke's voice cooled. Miss Zuena! She turned with perfect charm. Sir, you look wonderful. I am old enough, he said, to know when admiration is imitation. For a flicker of a second, irritation flashed beneath her smile. Then it vanished. Still terrifying, she said playfully to the others. Some things never change. No, Halima thought. Some things truly didn't. Zuena touched her arm with practiced intimacy. Come. Everyone's been asking whether you'd come. That was a lie so obvious it almost bored Halima. Still, she let herself be guided a few paces deeper into the courtyard. Not because she trusted the hand at her elbow, because she wanted to see how the trap had been built. At first it was all theatre, old classmates greeting her too warmly. Questions wrapped in sympathy but sharpened at the edges. So what do you do now? Are you married? You always were so serious. I suppose life made you even stronger. Do you still live near the industrial district? I heard your mother was sick. I'm so sorry. Each line sounded harmless in isolation. Together they formed the old machine class shame-curiosity spectacle. Halima answered carefully. I work. No, I'm not married. Yes, life teaches. She is unwell. Nothing extra. Nothing free. That frustrated them. Cruel people preferred victims who explained themselves. Then came Jabari. He was standing near the drinks table when she noticed him taller than most of the men around him in a charcoal suit cut with expensive restraint. Time had made him more controlled, more guarded. His face was leaner, his mouth firmer, his eyes carrying the kind of fatigue that belonged to people who lived too long among compromises. Back in school, he had been one of the few who had looked at Halima without either desire or contempt. He had once given her his notes after a teacher misplaced her exam script. Once walked her to the bus stop after boys followed her with laughter that was not really laughter. And once when it truly mattered, he had said nothing. Their eyes met. He did not smile. Neither did she. Zuena noticed that too. Of course she did. Well, she said brightly, look at this. The scholar and the silent gentleman. How nostalgic. Jabari crossed over glass in hand, every movement measured. Halima! Jabari. There was a pause, small from the outside, crowded from within. You made it, he said. So did you. His mouth shifted almost into a smile, then stopped. Yes. Zuena slipped between them with the ease of someone who believed all unfinished things belonged to her. Jabari is doing very well now, she said. Corporate law. Very important people. Very confidential work. That's good, Halima said. Jabari looked at her as if he wanted to ask whether she meant it. Before he could speak, one of the men near Zuena laughed and lifted his glass. And Halima, he asked. What empire are you running? The circle widened slightly. More ears tilted in. There it was. the moment when curiosity dropped its mask. Halima met the man's gaze. None. Oh, come on, he said. You must be doing something. She said she works? Zuena replied for her, smiling at the others. Which you know is admirable. In its way. A few people laughed. Jabari did not. Mr. Dyke had moved closer again, and Halima could feel his worry like a hand at her back. She wished he had gone home. She wished he did not have to see this. But another part of her was grimly glad he was there, because witnesses mattered. Cruelty always changed its story later if no one respectable had seen it with their own eyes. Zuena tilted her head. Actually, Halima, I've been dying to ask, did you ever use that scholarship properly? You were always so gifted. It would be tragic if all that effort went nowhere. The cruelty this time was more skillful. No open insult, no vulgarity, just a public reminder that Halima's presence here had once depended on charity. The surrounding smiles sharpened. Halima answered calmly. Education never goes nowhere. That should have ended it. It did not, because Zuena had not arranged this evening for subtle humiliation alone. She wanted blood with music. A server passed carrying drinks. Zuena lifted one glass, then another, and pressed one into Halima's hand. Please, she said. You must stop looking like you're attending a funeral. Relax. Enjoy yourself. Tonight is about celebrating how far everyone has come. The emphasis on everyone was so slight, most people would miss it. Halima took the glass without drinking. Across the courtyard, she noticed two girls from their old class holding phones already angled in her direction. One pretended to check lipstick in the black reflection of her screen. The other laughed at nothing while keeping the camera perfectly trained. Recording. Of course. Zuena saw Halima notice and her smile deepened. Then came the next move. Oh, she exclaimed, loud enough to turn nearby heads. We should take a group photo. Everyone from our scholarship circle. That would be so meaningful. There had never been a scholarship circle, only a handful of poorer students tolerated at the edges of privilege. But the phrase sounded generous. Noble, even. People began to gather. The circle became a stage before Halima had fully realized it. One woman said, Stand in the middle, Halima. Another added, Yes, let everyone see you. The laughter around those words was still light, still deniable, still only the beginning. And as Halima stood there under the courtyard lights with phones rising, old classmates smiling too brightly, Zuena glowing at the center of her own design, and Jabari saying nothing. Though his jaw had gone tight, she felt it with total clarity. The evening had finally stopped pretending to be a reunion. It had become what it was always meant to be, a public sacrifice, and this time they intended to enjoy every second of it. Closer, Zuena said, lifting her hand as if arranging flowers instead of people. No, not there, Halima. In the center. We want to see you. The courtyard lights had fully taken over now. Gold shimmered across the marble paths and polished glass walls. The jazz trio kept playing soft and expensive, as if humiliation were just another elegant soundtrack. Around Halima, former classmates drifted into a loose half-circle, smiling with the rehearsed excitement of people about to witness something ugly and call it fun. 2 phones were already up, then 4, then 8. Halima stepped where they wanted her to step, not because she was surrendering, because she wanted to know how far they were willing to go. Zuena clasped her hands. Perfect. Look at us. 10 years later. Some people changed their whole lives. She tilted her head toward Halima. And some stayed beautifully. Authentic. Laughter broke out, small, sharp, eager. The word hung in the air like perfume over rot. One of the men near the drinks table smirked. Authentic is a very classy way to say broke. That drew louder laughter. Someone behind him added, No, say resilient. That sounds kinder. Another voice, or inspirational. The circle tightened. Halima kept her face still, but inside her pulse had begun to beat with cold precision. She knew this rhythm, the measured escalation, the false friendliness, the way cruelty warmed itself before it struck. In school, the attacks had often begun exactly like this, with jokes soft enough to deny, then grew teeth once they saw no one would stop them. She looked briefly at Jabari. He stood 3 people away, rigid, his glass untouched. His eyes met hers, then flickered toward Zuena, then toward the phones. He knew, he understood exactly what was happening, and still he did nothing. That silence hurt more than the laughter. Mr. Dyke moved 1 step forward, his cane tapping the stone. Enough, he said. It was not loud, but it carried. For a heartbeat, the group hesitated. Then Zuena turned with that same polished smile. Sir, we're only joking. It's a reunion. Everyone's relaxing. No, Mr. Dyke said quietly. Some of you are relaxing. One of you is being tested. That line landed harder than Halima expected. Several people looked away. Embarrassment flashed across one woman's face. But embarrassment was weak. It rarely lasted in groups. It was too easy to kill with one more laugh. Zuena reached gently for Mr. Dyke's arm, playing concern now. Please sit down, sir. You know how emotional you get when you care too much. Halima saw the insult under the softness. Not just dismissing him, making him sound frail, unreliable. She stepped in before he could answer. It's fine, Halima said. Zuena turned back to her at once. See, she understands. No, Halima thought. I understand you. A tray passed by. Zuena took a paper cup from it, one of the cheap branded ones meant for water near the stage, rather than the real glasses being handed to sponsors and honored guests. She looked at the cup, then at Halima, and gave a mock gasp. Oh, this is almost poetic. The crowd leaned in. My God, she said, voice bright with performance. Do you remember Halima School Festival final year? You used to carry these around collecting leftovers after events. That was a lie, not entirely, which made it more dangerous. Halima had once stayed late after a fundraiser because the cafeteria staff was short-handed, and Mr. Dyke had asked if she could help stack chairs for a few extra transport notes. She had collected empty cups, not leftovers, not scraps, work, not begging. But liars loved half-truths. Half-truths wore respectability better than lies. Oh yes, a woman near the fountain said, pretending to remember. I forgot about that. No, another chimed in. I remember. She was always so hard-working. The tone made hard-working sound like low-born. Zuena held out the paper cup to Halima. Take it, for old time's sake. The circle erupted. Some laughed openly now, no longer hiding it behind manicured hands. One man bent forward, slapping his thigh. A girl, filming, whispered, This is unbelievable, in the thrilled voice of someone getting better content than expected. Halima looked at the cup, then at Zuena, then at the crowd. And in that suspended second, the entire courtyard seemed to split into layers, the visible scene and the truth beneath it. On the surface, a reunion joke. Underneath, a ritual. The rich proving to one another that they still knew how to place a poor woman where they believed she belonged. Below them. Entertaining. Smaller. Halima took the cup. Applause broke out instantly. Zuena's eyes lit with triumph. She had mistaken calm for defeat. Wonderful, she said. Now maybe someone can actually put something in it. And there it was. The line she had been walking toward all evening. No more deniable cruelty. A woman in emerald silk laughed too hard and pretended to reach into her purse. Oh, I think I have some change. A man took out a folded note and waved it. Only if she says please. Another voice. Ask her what her rate is first. That line changed the atmosphere. Even people who had been laughing flinched. Halima felt a heat rise inside her chest. Not shame this time, but something cleaner and more dangerous. Rage without confusion, the kind that sharpened instead of blinding. Jabari finally spoke. That's enough. It should have helped. It did not. Because it was late. Because the moment had already been allowed to bloom. Because intervention after permission was only another kind of cowardice. Zuena turned to him amused. Why suddenly feeling noble? His jaw tightened. I said enough. A beat passed. Then Zuena laughed and faced the crowd again. Look at this. One old classmate shows up in a sad dress, and suddenly all the men rediscover their consciences. The group laughed again, less certain now, but still cruel enough to continue. Halima set the paper cup down on a passing tray. A small move. But it changed something. Her voice when it came was calm. You invited me here to do this. Zuena blinked, then smiled wider. Do what we're reminiscing. No, Halima said. You're performing. Several phones shifted closer. Zuena's expression cooled by 1 degree. Careful. Don't ruin your own evening. My evening, Halima asked. You built this one. That made a few heads turn. They had expected silence. Tears, maybe. Anger, ideally. But not language like a blade. Zuena stepped closer, lowering her voice just enough to make the intimacy more threatening. Do you know what your problem always was, pride? You never learned how to accept your place gracefully. Halima met her eyes. And you never learned the difference between rising and climbing onto someone else's back. The words struck. A murmur moved through the group. Zuena's smile vanished for the first time. There it is, Halima thought. The real face. But the damage was done only in private measure. Publicly, Zuena still held the crowd, the cameras, the setting. She drew in a breath and decided to escalate. Oh, Halima, she said loudly, turning away from the personal wound and back toward the stage voice. Nobody is attacking you. We're celebrating how far people can come even from nothing. Then she let her gaze travel over Halima's dress, her shoes, the thinness at her wrists. Though admittedly, she's added, not everyone travels very far. The laughter returned, uglier now because it had survived hesitation. And then it happened. A boy, one of the alumni from a younger year, drunk on borrowed status, picked up a paper cup from a nearby table, dropped a few notes into it and shook it with a grin. Come on, he called, for transport fare. The crowd exploded, some with laughter, some with shock, some with that sick half-laugh people used when they knew something had become unforgivable but were too weak to separate themselves from it. Mr. Dyke slammed his cane once against the stone. Shame on all of you, but even that could not fully cut through the sound. Halima stood in the center of it all, perfectly still, while dozens of eyes devoured her and phone cameras captured every second. She could feel the old ghosts rising the school corridor, the bus stop, the bathroom mirror, the long walk home with humiliation burning hotter than sun. Only this time there was something else with it. Not helplessness. Knowledge. They were showing themselves too clearly. She turned her head slightly. Beyond the crowd, beyond the fountain and the lights, and the polished cruelty, she heard it before most of them did, the low, seamless purr of an engine, too refined to be mistaken for anything ordinary. A black luxury car glided through the academy gates. Not flashy, not loud. Powerful enough not to need either. The sound alone began to pull attention sideways. A few people lowered their phones. The alumni committee near the entrance straightened immediately. Security guards who had ignored the humiliation suddenly moved with anxious energy. Zuena frowned, thrown off rhythm for the first time. What now? Then the car rolled fully into view. Its body reflected the courtyard lights like dark water. The crest on the front made 3 older men near the stage go pale with recognition. Even from across the courtyard, even before a single door opened, the shift in atmosphere was immediate. Wealth had arrived, the kind wealth that did not ask to be welcomed, because it owned the room the moment it entered. Someone whispered, Adeyemi. Another hissed, That car belongs to Adeyemi Lux. A third voice, nervous now. Why would they be here? The answer came in silence. The car stopped, not near the sponsor's banner, not beside the headmaster, not by the honored guests. It stopped directly in front of Halima. The courtyard forgot how to breathe. Every sound seemed to collapse inward. The jazz music faltered. Laughter died mid-throat. Even the phones still raised suddenly looked ridiculous in the hands holding them. Halima did not move, but inside her, everything went still. The driver stepped out first. Immaculate uniform, white gloves, controlled face. He walked around the vehicle, opened the rear door with precise deference, then turned not to Zuena, not to the school officials, not to the richest donor present, to Halima. And before the whole courtyard, before the classmates who had just tried to reduce her to a begging joke, before the cameras still recording, in disbelief, he bowed his head slightly and said in a clear, respectful voice, "Miss Halima, Madame Nala is waiting for you." No one laughed. That was the first thing Halima noticed. A moment earlier, the courtyard had been full of noise, mockery, glass music, the bright cruelty of people entertaining themselves with someone else's humiliation. Now silence spread through the air so suddenly it felt almost violent. Every face around her seemed to freeze in a different stage of shock. Some mouths were still half open from unfinished laughter. Some phones remained lifted, but no one remembered to lower them. Even the boy with the paper cup in his hand looked as if he wanted to disappear inside his own skin. Zuena recovered first, though not gracefully. Her smile broke, reassembled, and returned wearing confusion dressed as confidence. "There must be some mistake," she said, letting out a little laugh that landed dead on the marble. "Halima, what is this?" Halima did not answer. She was staring at the open car door. The interior light glowed soft and warm against black leather. She could smell something expensive, even from where she stood, cedar clean linen money without effort. But what held her still was not the car. It was the name. Madame Nala. The driver had spoken it with professional ease, as though Halima should already know it. Yet her pulse had begun to beat in a strange, uneven way. She had heard that name once before, weeks ago, on a radio discussion about philanthropic boards and luxury expansion. Nala Okonkwo, advisor, strategist, longtime confidant of the late billionaire Mozi Adeyemi. One of those women powerful men feared without admitting it. Why would such a woman be waiting for her? Miss Halima, the driver repeated, quieter this time, but no less respectful. "Madam is waiting." Zuena stepped forward before Halima could move. "I'm sorry," she said, flashing her social smile at the driver. "We're in the middle of a private event, and I think there's been a misunderstanding." "She's—" The driver turned his head just enough to look at her. It was not rude. It was worse. It was the kind of blank-trained indifference reserved for irrelevant obstacles. "My instructions," he said, "were for Miss Halima." The heat that rose in Zuena's face was almost beautiful. Someone behind her whispered, "Oh God." Jabari had not moved, but Halima could feel his attention on her like a pressure point. Mr. Dyke, leaning hard on his cane, now looked less surprised than relieved, as if he did not understand what was happening either, but recognized the shape of justice when it entered a room. Zuena laughed again, more sharply. "Well, go on then," she said to Halima. "Don't keep your mystery benefactor waiting." There it was. The new strategy. If the public humiliation failed, recast the moment as scandal. Make Halima look cheap, dependent, bought. Halima turned to her slowly. For the first time all evening, she let the silence answer before her words did. Then she said, "You don't need to worry about where I'm going." The line was simple, but it landed with a force Zuena had not prepared for. A few people nearby looked down. A few looked at Zuena with the first flicker of doubt. Cruel crowds were brave only while the script stayed familiar. The moment the victim stopped behaving correctly, fear entered the room. Halima stepped toward the car. Every eye followed her. She was suddenly aware of her shoes against the stone, of the night air on her face, of how small the distance was and how large it felt. Each step carried her farther from the circle they had built around her and deeper into something she did not yet understand. She could still hear the phone's recording. She could still feel the sting of the last 10 minutes on her skin. But beneath that humiliation, something colder had begun to rise. Not triumph, certainty. This car had not come by accident. When she reached the open door, the driver moved slightly aside. Halima hesitated just once, not from fear of the people behind her, but from instinct. A poor woman learned early that any door opening suddenly in front of her might be opportunity trap or both. Then she bent and stepped inside. The door closed softly behind her, cutting off the courtyard like a knife. Silence filled the car. Not empty silence, controlled silence. The kind used by people who did not repeat themselves. Across from Halima sat a woman in a charcoal-tailored suit, her posture straight, her face composed with the elegance of age that had been sharpened by power rather than softened by it. Her skin glowed deep bronze beneath the dim interior light. Silver threaded through her closely styled hair. A single ring flashed on one hand, resting lightly over a leather folder on her lap. Her eyes were the unsettling part. They were not simply assessing Halima. They were searching her. Madame Nala did not speak at once. She let the car begin moving before she said in a voice low and precise, "Close your hand." Halima blinked. What the pendant Madame Nala said. "You touched it when the driver spoke my name. Close your hand around it." Halima had not even realized she had reached for it. Slowly she drew the small half-circle pendant from beneath her collar. It lay in her palm, worn and dull, the metal edge broken in a pattern that suggested it had once locked into something larger. Madame Nala looked at it, and for the first time her face changed. Not much, but enough. A long breath entered her body and left it again. So she said softly, "It really is you." Halima's throat tightened. "You know this pendant?" Madame Nala did not answer directly. Instead, she opened the leather folder and removed an old photograph protected in a transparent sleeve. She held it out. Halima took it. The image was faded but clear enough to wound. A much younger Mozi Adeyemi stood in a garden beside a woman in white. In his arms, he held a little girl, perhaps 3 years old, serious-eyed, wearing a small dress and a chain around her neck. On that chain was the other half of the pendant. Halima's fingers tightened so sharply around the photo that the plastic crackled. "No," she whispered. Madame Nala watched her carefully. "I thought the same thing the first time I saw you from a distance. Then I told myself, grief invents resemblances. Then I saw the pendant at the reunion registration photos that were sent to me from the gate. And I knew grief had nothing to do with it." Halima looked up sharply. "The gate I had people watching tonight." "Why?" "Because some invitations are sent for memory," Madame Nala said. "And some are sent for slaughter." The words went through Halima like cold water. "You knew what they would do." "I suspected." Madame Nala's gaze did not soften. "I did not know how vicious they would be. For that I owe you an apology." Halima stared at her. "You watched." "I waited until I was certain," Madame Nala replied. "If I intervened too early, you would never know which masks these people wear when they think power is absent." Halima turned toward the dark window. City lights were sliding by in long streaks. Her reflection trembled faintly in the glass. A young woman in a simple dress, eyes too alert, face still carrying the after-image of public shame. None of this felt real. "Who are you to me?" she asked. Madame Nala shook her head once. "That is the wrong question." Halima looked back at her. "The better question," Madame Nala said, "is who you were before the world reduced you to surviving." For a few seconds, Halima could not speak. Then anger rose to protect her from confusion. "I don't have time for riddles. My mother is sick. I work 2 jobs. I was humiliated in front of people who have wanted me beneath them since I was a child. If you brought me into this car to speak like a poet, take me back." Something like approval flickered in Madame Nala's eyes. "Good," she said. "Good, yes. If you had collapsed into tears or gratitude, I would have doubted everything." Halima's jaw tightened. Everything about what Madame Nala reached into the folder again, and this time withdrew another photograph, newer, sharper. It showed the lobby of a private hospital from years ago, security still timestamp in the corner. 2 men were wheeling a gurney. A woman ran beside it, half obscured by motion blur. In the arms of one of the orderlies was a child wrapped in a blanket. 22 years ago, Madame Nala said there was a crash outside Lagos. The press were told it was a transport incident involving support staff attached to the Adeyemi family. That part was true. What the press were not told was that the child of Mosi Adeyemi disappeared in the chaos. Halima's lips parted. Madame Nala continued. The official story was kidnapping. Ransom expected. Search ongoing. Tragic family nightmare. No body found. No child recovered. Public sympathy lasted a month. Private investigations lasted much longer. Halima looked down at the photograph again, then at her own pendant, then at Madame Nala. "You think I'm that child?" "No," Madame Nala said. Halima's heart seemed to drop. Then the older woman leaned forward slightly. "I think you are Halima Adeyemi." The name struck harder than a slap. Halima recoiled. "No, you asked for truth. I said no." Madame Nala let the refusal stand. "Fear does not change blood." "I am Halima," she said, voice suddenly shaking. "Just Halima. Mama Asha raised me. Mama Asha found me. Mama Asha is my family." At that, Madame Nala's expression altered again, but this time with something gentler. "I am not here," she said, "to take your mother from you." Halima swallowed hard. "Then why now? Why after all these years? Because someone inside the family has begun moving money, property, and succession papers in ways that suggest panic, because the dead do not stay quiet when there is wealth attached to their silence, because a search I believed had failed may not have failed at all." Madame Nala paused. "And because tonight, when I saw you stand in that courtyard and refuse to kneel, I recognized something I had seen once before in your father." Halima looked at her, unable to breathe properly. Madame Nala opened her hand. In her palm lay the missing half of the pendant, perfectly matched. "Take it," she said. Halima did not move. The car slowed as it turned into a private road, lined with trees and guarded gates she could barely make out beyond the dark glass. Her life, small, strained, painfully clear, seemed to be splitting open beneath her with every passing second. Outside the reunion they had laughed because they thought no one was coming for her. Inside this car, another possibility had begun to unfold. Not rescue, not fantasy, something far more dangerous, a hidden truth. And if Madame Nala was right, then the humiliation Halima had endured that night was not the end of the story. It was the moment the story had finally come looking for her. The house Halima returned to that night looked smaller than it had that morning, not because the walls had shrunk, because too much had happened inside a few brutal hours for the room to still belong to the same life. The alley was nearly quiet when the black car finally left her at the corner far enough away not to attract the neighborhood. Madame Nala had insisted on discretion. Halima had insisted on coming home immediately. Neither woman had trusted sleep after a conversation like that. Now, as Halima stood before the warped wooden door of the house she had known for most of her life, the night air felt strangely thin in her lungs. In her bag lay the photograph. In her fist, still warm from being held too tightly, lay the second half of the pendant. She opened the door. The room was dark except for the kerosene lamp burning low beside Mama Asha's bed. The old woman was awake. Of course she was. Mama Asha sat propped against her pillows, one hand over the blanket, eyes fixed on the entrance, before Halima had even fully stepped inside. Fear lived openly on her face, and that alone told Halima more than words could have. Mama Asha was not merely worried about why Halima had come home late. She was worried because she already knew what kind of night this might become. "You're back," Mama Asha said. Her voice was steady. Too steady. Halima closed the door behind her and did not answer at once. She set her bag down, slowly removed her shoes, and crossed the room with the mechanical calm of someone delaying an explosion by pretending it had not yet started. Mama Asha looked at her dress, at her face, at the stiffness in her shoulders. They did something. Yes. Did you eat? Halima let out a short, humorless breath. No. Then there is rice, Mama. That one word changed everything. Mama Asha fell silent. Halima stood at the edge of the bed and looked at the woman who had raised her, the woman whose hands had braided her hair, slapped sense into her pride, fed her from her own hunger, and held her through fevers and disappointments, and nights when pain made the future look impossible. The woman who smelled of soap, eucalyptus, and home. Halima's chest tightened until it hurt. "Mama," she said again, softer now. "I need the truth." "Mama." Asha's eyes dropped at once to Halima's hand, to the pendant. More precisely to the two halves now joined together. The older woman stopped breathing for a fraction of a second. That was enough. Halima felt the floor tilt inside her. "You know it," she whispered. "You know exactly what this is." Mama Asha closed her eyes. For a long moment the only sound in the room was the lamp flame fluttering and the far-off bark of a dog somewhere down the alley. Then Mama Asha opened her eyes again, and Halima saw something there she had never seen before in all the years they had lived together. Not guilt, not shame, the exhaustion of a promise that had lasted too long. "Sit," Mama Asha said. "I don't want to sit. Then you will fall standing. I said I want the truth, and I said sit." The old firmness in her voice broke something in Halima before it steadied her. She dragged the stool over and sat facing the bed. Knees close, hands clenched so hard the joined pendant pressed a mark into her skin. Mama Asha looked at her for a long time before speaking. "When I found you," she said at last, "you were wearing that pendant and one tiny gold earring in your left ear. Only one. The other had been torn out. Your dress was soaked through. You had blood on your temple and mud on your legs. You were too quiet for a child who had gone through what you must have gone through." Halima did not move. The room had become a tunnel. Only that voice mattered. "There had been an accident on the outer road," Mama Asha continued. "People were shouting about a crash. Rich people's cars. Security men. Confusion. I had gone there because one of the market women said sometimes after accidents, luggage spills, and poor people can salvage what the road refuses to keep." The words should have shocked Halima. They did not. Poverty had never disguised itself in their home. It had always spoken plainly. "I did not see the crash," Mama Asha said. "By the time I arrived, most of the people were gone. Too many guards, too much panic. But behind the ditch near a stand of thorn bushes I heard a sound." Her voice wavered for the first time. Not crying, not exactly. Just breathing. Small, frightened, like a creature trying not to be found. Halima felt her own breathing begin to match the rhythm of the story. "I pushed the branches aside," Mama Asha said. "And there you were." The lamp hissed softly. "You looked at me," the old woman whispered, "as if you had already learned that adults were dangerous." Halima's throat closed. "I remember thinking, this is not a lost child. This is a hidden child." She stopped and coughed, one hand pressing her chest until the spasm passed. Halima instinctively leaned forward, but Mama Asha lifted a finger, refusing help until she could go on. "I should have taken you to the authorities." "I know that. I knew it then." She laughed once bitterly. But the authorities had already begun taking instructions from men in dark cars. Men too interested in controlling the story, too quick to decide what had happened before any mother had finished screaming. I stood there, holding you, watching them search the road but not the bushes, and I knew one thing with absolute certainty. What Halima asked. Mama Asha met her eyes. Whoever was supposed to find you must not find you first. The words hit Halima harder than the revelation about blood or birth, because that was the sentence of a woman making a choice. A terrible one, a life-changing one, not an accident, not a misunderstanding. A choice. You took me, Halima said. Yes. You never told anyone? No. Why, Mama Asha's face broke then, not into tears, but into the ache of memory carried too long without witness. Because before I reached the road, I saw a man arguing with another man beside one of the damaged vehicles. They thought nobody important was listening. I was nobody important. That is how poor women hear the truth. One said, if the child is found, everything changes. The other said, then the child must not be found. The room seemed to lose all warmth. Halima stared at her. You're sure I have repeated those words in my head for 22 years, Mama Asha said. I am sure. A long silence followed. Halima rose suddenly and moved away, then back again, then away once more, as if the room had become too small to hold her body and her thoughts at the same time. You should have told me, she said. Yes, you should have told me years ago, yes. You let me grow up with nothing, with questions, with people calling me gutter blood and charity child and worse, and all the time I let you grow up alive. The force of Mama Asha's answer stopped her cold. The old woman sat straighter in bed now, frail body lit by stubborn fire. You think I do not know what you suffered? She said. I counted it. I tasted it every day on your face when you came home trying not to cry. But tell me, Halima, if I had told you at 10, what would you have done? At 12, at 16. Run to the gates of rich people and demand your name. Beg them to claim you. Trust the same kind of power that had already tried to erase you. Halima opened her mouth and found no words. I was poor, Mama Asha went on quieter now, but I was not stupid. I knew what money can buy. Police? Silence. Graves. I knew that if someone high enough had wanted you gone once, they might still want it years later. So I chose the only thing I had the right to choose. Her hand trembled against the blanket. I chose to keep you breathing. Halima felt anger and gratitude collide so violently inside her that she could not separate them. Tears burned her eyes, not soft tears, not helpless ones, furious tears, humiliated tears, the tears of a child who discovers too late that love has been protecting her with lies. You were going to die, she said hoarsely. And still you would have told me nothing. Mama Asha's gaze flickered. That was answer enough. Halima turned away, pressing the heel of her hand against her mouth. The joined pendant cut into her palm. She welcomed the pain. After a while, Mama Asha spoke again, but now her voice carried something else. Fear. There is more. Halima turned slowly. Of course there is. Mama Asha swallowed. Years after I found you, when you were about 7, a man came to the market asking questions. Not your name. Never your name. Just whether anyone had taken in a child after the crash years earlier. He described the pendant poorly, but enough. I lied. I said no. He watched me too long. Halima went still. What man? I did not know his name then. Mama Asha looked down at her hands. Later I saw his face in a newspaper beside powerful people. A family event. A company event. I don't remember which. But I remember the name under the picture. The lamp flame flickered as a breeze found the cracks in the wall. Adeyemi, she said. Halima's heart lurched. Which one? Mama Asha shut her eyes, searching memory. Not the founder. The younger one. The brother. Tunda Halima whispered. Mama Asha opened her eyes again, and Halima saw terror there now, plain and naked. Yes. The name seemed to settle over the room, like ash. Madame Nala's warnings. The missing child. The hidden search. The panic in succession papers, all of it sharpened into shape. He was looking for me, Halima said. No. Mama Asha's voice broke. He was making sure no one else had found you. That silence lasted longer than all the others. Then Halima sat down again, suddenly emptied. Not because the truth had become easier, because it had become undeniable. She looked at Mama Asha, really looked at her, and saw not a thief, not a liar, but a woman who had stood in the path of something monstrous, with nothing but instinct and hunger and a stubborn, dangerous heart. A woman who had taken in a child that could have brought death to her door and done it anyway. The rage inside Halima shifted. It did not disappear. It widened. I was angry with you, she said at last. You still are? Yes. Mama Asha nodded. Good. It means you understand the cost. Halima gave a shattered laugh at that, then covered her face. When Mama Asha reached for her, she went at once, dropping to her knees beside the bed and folding herself into the thin, familiar body that had been her first shelter in the world. Mama Asha held her with trembling arms. I did not steal you, she whispered into Halima's hair. I saved you. And then I loved you so badly that I became willing to be hated for it. Halima broke, then not elegantly, not quietly. All the restraint of the night cracked apart in one raw, shaking sob. She clung to the woman who was and was not her mother, the woman who had lied to her and fed her and guarded her life with ferocity greater than truth. When she finally pulled back, eyes swollen, chest aching, Mama Asha cupped her face. Listen to me, the old woman said. Whatever blood says, whatever papers say, whatever rich people come claiming my love for you is not borrowed. It is not temporary. It is not second-hand. Halima nodded, unable to speak. Then Mama Asha's fingers tightened suddenly on her wrist. And now that they have found you, she said, fear flooding back into her voice, you must understand this too. If Tunde Adeyemi knows you are alive, he will not welcome you home. Halima stared at her. Mama Asha swallowed hard. He will finish what he started. 2 mornings later, Halima entered the Adeyemi estate through gates taller than any building on her street. The car carrying her moved soundlessly over a curved drive lined with trimmed hedges, white stone lanterns, and imported palms that looked too disciplined to belong to real earth. Ahead, the mansion rose in terraces of glass and pale sandstone, each level catching the morning light with the quiet arrogance of old money. Water slid down a black marble wall into a reflecting pool wide enough to feed half her neighborhood for a month if it were rice instead of decoration. Halima sat very still in the back seat. Beside her, Madame Nala reviewed a leather folder without appearing to read it. She had spent the last 48 hours moving with ruthless efficiency, arranging a private medical consultation for Mama Asha, relocating her temporarily to a guarded clinic wing under a different name, and sending discreet investigators to confirm what old records and hidden payments had begun to suggest. Nothing was official yet. Nothing could be trusted yet. But the direction of the truth was now too clear to ignore. Halima had not slept properly since the reunion. Whenever she closed her eyes, she saw different versions of herself colliding, the poor girl in the courtyard holding a paper cup, the child from the photograph, the daughter Mama Asha had chosen rather than claimed, the possible heir to a fortune built on secrets, the target of a man powerful enough to erase people without lifting his own hands. You do not have to speak more than necessary, Madame Nala said as the car slowed before the main entrance. Watch before you answer. Listen before you react. People reveal more when they think you are overwhelmed. Halima kept her eyes on the mansion. "And if I'm not overwhelmed, then hide it, at least for today." A line of staff stood waiting beneath the portico, house attendants in cream uniforms, a butler with a silver tray. No one had asked for two security men whose eyes took in Halima's face with professional blankness and filed it away as something that might later matter very much. Everything about the scene was choreographed to suggest dignity, control, continuity, which meant the house was already nervous. The door opened. Halima stepped out. The marble beneath her shoes gleamed like water. For a second she was aware of every contrast at once, the quality of her plain, dark dress against the architecture, the memory of Mama Asha coughing in a one-room house against the fountain, whispering behind her, the way the staff looked at her. Not with open contempt, not even exactly with curiosity, but with the tense, careful attention people gave to a package that might contain either a gift or an explosive. Inside the entrance hall was cathedral high. Sunlight fell through geometric glass onto polished stone floors veined in gold. A suspended chandelier descended like frozen rain. Beyond it, a long gallery displayed sculptures, rare textiles framed awards, and black and white photographs of the Adeyemi family, receiving presidents, launching factories, smiling beside diplomats and charity boards. Power did not merely live here. It had been curated. A woman in a dove-grey suit approached from the far end of the hall, tablet in hand, face composed into administrative neutrality. "Madame Nala," she said, inclining her head. "He's waiting in the west salon." Of course he was, Halima thought. Not the office, not the boardroom, somewhere softer, less threatening. A room designed to suggest family before strategy. Madame Nala did not slow. And his son arrived 20 minutes ago, her son. That detail tightened something in Halima's chest. In the outline Madame Nala had given her the previous night, the names had sat cleanly on paper. Tunde Adeyemi, younger brother of the late Mosi Adeyemi. Current executive head of the family holdings. His only son Kelechi Adeyemi, educated abroad, polished for succession, engaged to a socialite from an influential family. Halima already knew the socialite's name before anyone spoke it. Zuena. The west salon smelled faintly of cedar and bergamot. Tall windows opened toward a terrace garden where white birds stepped through clipped grass like living decorations. A cluster of low cream sofas surrounded a black wood table, set with tea no one intended to drink honestly. Tunde Adeyemi rose when Halima entered. He was a handsome man, in the expensive, disciplined way of those who spent money maintaining authority rather than attracting desire. His hair was silver at the temples. His suit fit perfectly. His face held grief so elegantly rehearsed it might have passed for genuine if Halima had not known what Mama Asha had told her. He crossed the room with arms slightly open. "Halima," he said, voice warm with controlled emotion. At last. Halima stopped well short of his reach. For the smallest fraction of a second, something cold flashed in his eyes. Then it was gone. "I'm glad," she said evenly, "that one of us knows what 'at last' means." Madame Nala moved just enough to make clear she had heard and approved. Tunde's smile adjusted. Direct. Good. My brother valued directness. Your brother, Halima thought. Not my father, not yet. Never before papers, never before calculation. He gestured toward the seating area. "Please." Halima sat. Madame Nala remained standing a moment longer than politeness required, forcing Tunde to sit after her rather than before. A small thing. But rich families often fought first through posture. Kelechi entered then from the terrace, phone in hand, apology already arranged on his face. He was in his early 30s, clean-cut, wearing understated wealth, with the carelessness of someone born inside it. He stopped when he saw Halima, and his expression altered, not to shock, but to appraisal. Quick, intelligent, faintly irritated at being surprised. So it's true, he said. Tunda's tone sharpened mildly. Kelechi. What? He slipped the phone into his pocket and gave Halima a courteous nod. I'm not being rude. I'm adapting. Halima held his gaze. You should practice faster. That made Madame Nala's mouth almost move. Kelechi sat opposite her, one ankle over his knee, studying her more openly now. There was no cruelty in his face, but there was entitlement, subtle, fluent, lifelong. The entitlement of a man who had always assumed rooms, companies, and futures would eventually arrange themselves around him. Tunde folded his hands. Before we discuss anything else, let me say how deeply sorry I am for what happened to you. If you are indeed who we believe you may be, then you have suffered because this family failed you. It was a good sentence. Too good. Halima asked, and if I'm not who you believe, then we will still make certain you are treated with dignity, he replied, which meant compensation. Quiet settlement. Containment. Madame Nala said, the DNA comparison is being expedited. Tunde inclined his head. As it should be. Halima watched him carefully. Not his words. His timing. The momentary tightening near the eyes when Madame Nala mentioned the test. The almost invisible tap of his thumb against one finger. He had prepared for the possibility of her existence. He had not prepared for the speed of her arrival. A servant entered to pour tea. No one touched it. Then the door opened again. Laughter arrived before perfume. Zuvaina stepped into the salon wearing pale green silk, and a smile sharpened into innocence. On her finger, a diamond the size of a private school scholarship flashed as she lifted one hand to her chest. I'm so sorry, she said. Traffic was impossible. She saw Halima, paused, performed surprise with remarkable skill. Oh. Kelechi stood at once and crossed to kiss her cheek. You're late. Forgive me, she murmured, though her eyes never fully left Halima's face. Halima felt the room rearrange itself. The reunion cruelty, the paper cup, the courtyard laughter, all of it returned in a different key. Here Zuvaina was no longer merely a former classmate, weaponizing class. Here she stood at the threshold of legal power, romantic legitimacy, and family proximity. Her future had already begun wrapping itself around the Adeyemi name, which meant Halima's presence threatened more than pride. It threatened architecture. Tunde rose with smooth hospitality. Zuvaina, you remember Halima? Remember. As if they were distant acquaintances. Zuvaina gave the tiniest laugh. How could I forget? We were in school together. Halima saw it then, the caution beneath Zuvaina's charm. She had not expected to meet Halima here. More importantly, she had not expected to meet her in front of Tunde and Kelechi. The reunion had been meant to push Halima downward into scandal or invisibility. Instead, the girl she had turned into a spectacle had arrived in the center of the one family whose approval Zuvaina needed to complete her ascent. Kelechi, oblivious or pretending to be said lightly. Apparently our family history has acquired a surprise chapter. Zuvaina sat beside him with perfect grace. So I hear? Madame Nala did not sit. Then perhaps you also hear, she said, that discretion would be wise. Zuvaina smiled up at her. Of course. I would never exploit something so sensitive. The lie was almost elegant. Halima looked straight at her. No. You prefer an audience first. The words struck the room like glass. Kelechi frowned slightly. What does that mean? Zuvaina's face remained composed, but Halima caught the flicker of panic beneath it. It means she's upset, she said softly. And I understand why. The reunion got out of hand. Tunde turned his head. What reunion? There it was another small but useful surprise. Either he truly did not know details, or his people had decided the public humiliation of a poor former classmate was not worth reporting upward. Both possibilities revealed something ugly. Zuena lowered her eyes just enough to suggest regret. Some alumni behaved badly. There was filming, teasing. I tried to calm it. Halima almost laughed. Madame Nala said, "Your attempt at calming events included offering Miss Halima a paper cup in front of multiple cameras." Silence. Kelechi looked from one woman to the other. "Is that true?" Zuena's voice gained hurt. "That is a cruel way to describe a joke taken too far." A joke, Halima repeated. Zuena turned to her with wounded sweetness. "I already feel terrible about it." "No," Halima said. "You feel unlucky about it." The blow landed cleanly. Tunde intervened before the exchange could go further. "This is not the time." No, Halima thought. "This is exactly the time, because now the room can see her." Kelechi's eyes had changed. Not softened, not hardened, focused. For the first time, he seemed to understand that the woman beside him, the one he planned to marry into the family brand, had a past uglier than social competition. And the woman across from him, dressed plainly and sitting perfectly straight, was not a sentimental threat, but a living complication, with memory intelligence and a public humiliation trail that could become disastrous if connected to a succession dispute. Business, then. That was the language he trusted. Tunde leaned forward, voice measured. "Halima, until the tests confirm what we suspect, it would be premature to discuss titles or positions. But regardless of outcome, this family will ensure your mother receives the best care and that you are protected. Payment again, polished into generosity." Halima asked, "Protected from whom?" No one answered immediately, which was answer enough. Madame Nala finally said, "From the attention that will come once your existence becomes known." Tunde's gaze moved to her unreadable. "And from opportunists." The word hung in the room. Opportunists. A warning disguised as principle. Was he speaking about tabloids? Rivals Zuena Halima herself? Perhaps all at once. Halima sat back slightly and understood with sudden perfect clarity what this house intended to do if given the chance. Not necessarily kill her, not immediately. That was too crude for people who owned lawyers and foundations and headlines. No, the first move would be softer. Absorb her, define her, feed her comfort while denying her authority. Turn her into a symbol, a beneficiary, a tragic recovered daughter with gratitude in place of questions, unless she learned faster than they expected. Kelechi broke the silence. "Father, the board will hear rumors before evening. If she stays here, staff will talk." Madame Nala said, "Then staff will be reminded of their contracts." Zuena placed a hand lightly on Kelechi's wrist. "Maybe the wiser thing is privacy. For everyone. Everyone." Halima looked at that manicured hand and felt the old courtyard insult transform into something far more dangerous. Zuena had not only humiliated her in public, she was now trying to help shape the terms of her containment. And in that moment, Halima understood the true cost of walking into wealth late. The poor thought riches meant safety. In fact, riches often meant your enemies had better furniture. The first real proof arrived at 2:17 in the morning. Halima was awake when Madame Nala knocked once on the sitting room door of the private guest suite and entered without waiting for permission. The older woman was still dressed, though her jacket was gone, and fatigue had finally begun to show around her eyes. In one hand she carried a slim tablet. In the other, a sealed brown envelope marked with the logo of an archival security firm. Halima rose from the sofa at once. What happened? Madame Nala closed the door behind her. "We found what someone worked very hard to bury." That sentence drove sleep entirely out of Halima's body. The guest suite assigned to her was larger than the whole house she had shared with Mama Asha. It had cream walls, carved wood screens, and a bed so wide it looked like a declaration of excess. Halima had refused the bed and taken the sofa instead. She did not trust softness in enemy territory. Not yet. Madame Nala crossed to the table, laid down the envelope, and activated the tablet. Sit. Halima remained standing. No. Madame Nala glanced up once accepted the answer and turned the screen toward her. On it was a scanned ledger page, then a list of shell companies, then a sequence of transfer records spanning years. The names meant little at first, consulting firms. Transport services, legal retainers, off-book security reimbursements, but the pattern underneath them was unmistakable. Money had moved after the crash, quietly, repeatedly, always through intermediaries who no longer existed or had been dissolved into other holdings. What am I looking at? Halima asked. Maintenance payments for silence, Madame Nala said. Halima stared. We began with an old expense anomaly, tied to a closed transport subsidiary. Madame Nala continued. Then Jabari did something useful. At the sound of his name, Halima's jaw tightened. Not because she did not trust his competence, because she still did not know whether she trusted his courage. Madame Nala seemed to read the thought. He hates himself enough these days to become efficient? That can be useful. That almost made Halima smile. Almost. What did he find? A set of legal waivers hidden inside a dead property file, Madame Nala said. Insurance settlements for staff losses after the crash. Nothing unusual on the surface, but attached to the file was a restricted inventory reference to security footage that should not have survived. Halima's pulse shifted. Footage Madame Nala nodded once. Partial. Damaged. Time-stamped. And very inconvenient. She opened the envelope and removed 3 printed still frames. The first showed the wreckage site from a distance, flashing lights, 2 damaged vehicles, men running through rain and mud. The second was blurrier, taken from another angle. But one detail stood out. A child-sized blanket bundle in the arms of a uniformed driver. The third was the one that changed the temperature in the room. Halima took it with both hands. A black SUV stood off to the side of the crash scene, away from the emergency lights. Beside it, under an umbrella held by security, was a younger Tunde Adeyemi. Not grieving, not frantic, not searching, watching. And near him stood another man, face turned half away from the lens, but visible enough to identify if one had seen him recently. Halima looked up sharply. That's, yes, Madame Nala said, Zuwena's father. A hollow, furious silence opened inside Halima. The man in the photograph was not just a random associate. He was known now as Solomon Bensa, a respectable businessman with charity board memberships, luxury developments, and a carefully cultivated image of rising elegance. Years ago, he had been much lower in status, much closer to men who wanted power more than dignity. Now the connection sat plain in Halima's hand. Zuwena's family had not merely benefited from the culture of contempt around people like her. They had been tied to the origin of it. He was there, Halima said. He was there, Madame Nala confirmed. And 2 years later, his first major contract came through a construction arm tied to Adeyemi Holdings. Small on paper, life-changing in practice. Payment, reward, promotion in exchange for usefulness. Halima felt her chest grow tight with rage. Not the hot, immediate kind she had felt in the reunion courtyard. Something slower, deeper. The rage that comes when humiliation develops roots and you finally see how far down they go. She knew, Halima said. Madame Nala did not pretend confusion. Zuwena, yes, I believe she knew pieces, Madame Nala said. Enough to understand that your existence would be dangerous to her future. Halima turned away, pressing her fingers to her mouth. She thought of Zuwena at 16, borrowing her notes and sharing snacks and promising sisterhood in whispers. She thought of the reunion smile, the paper cup, the bright cruelty sharpened by fear. Suddenly the whole thing rearranged itself. Zuwena had not humiliated Halima merely because she enjoyed power, though she did. She had humiliated her because humiliation was useful. If Halima remained socially ridiculous, morally suspect, romantically compromised, then any future claim she made could be framed as ambition, delusion, or revenge. Destroy the witness early. Discredit the truth before it learns to speak. What else? Halima asked. Madame Nala swiped to another file. This time it was audio. Static cracked through the speaker first, followed by muffled voices. One male, one female. At first the words were hard to make out, but then the recording sharpened. I told you she should have disappeared years ago. Zuena. Even in distortion, Halima knew her voice. The male voice responded, lower, impatient. Keep your voice down. She was nothing until your family dragged her out of nowhere. That nothing may be blood. A pause. Then Zuena again, colder than Halima had ever heard her. Then make sure blood is not enough. The audio ended. The room stayed silent. Halima did not realize she was trembling until the paper in her hand began to shake. Where did you get that? Madame Nala's face remained hard. From a security archive at a private restaurant used by Tunde's inner circle. Jabari pulled access through a pending compliance review. The date was 3 weeks ago. So recent. So deliberate. Not old sin. Active threat. Halima sat down without meaning to. The force had gone out of her knees. Tunde and Zuena were meeting. Yes. And he knows. Yes. And Kelechi. Madame Nala exhaled once. I do not yet know how much the son knows, which makes him dangerous in a different way. Ignorance inside powerful men is often just delayed loyalty. Halima leaned forward, elbows on knees, the pendant pressing coldly against her throat. Then why are we still in this house? Because running before we secure the full chain of proof would turn you into a rumor, Madame Nala said. And rumors are easier to kill than daughters. The sentence held. Halima looked down at the still frame of Tunde and Solomon Bensa beside the SUV. Mama Asha was right. She usually is, Madame Nala said. That surprised a short laugh out of Halima. Brief, broken, but real. Then it vanished. What now? Madame Nala's expression sharpened. Now we stop reacting and start forcing the board. The board, Adeyemi Lux Group, is not just a family. It is directors, trustees holding votes, inheritance, triggers, external auditors, and public optics. Tunde controls much of it, but not everything. If we move correctly, he cannot bury you without burying himself. Halima rose again, steadier this time. Tell me. Madame Nala laid out the plan, piece by piece. By morning, the DNA confirmation would be in final chain of custody review. By afternoon, select board members with old loyalty to Mosi would receive sealed notice of an emergency governance briefing. At the same time, the investigators would secure the original crash settlement logs and file preservation orders on several dormant accounts before Tunde's people could erase them. Jabari, using his access through the firm's legal compliance arm, would duplicate all relevant materials to an external escrow vault under instructions to release them automatically if anything happened to Halima or Mama Asha. Insurance against disappearance. Halima listened without interrupting. And Zuena, she asked at last. Madame Nala held her gaze. Zuena is not the main enemy. No, Halima said quietly. But she is part of the wound. Madame Nala did not disagree. The older woman handed her another document. Not evidence. A guest list. Halima frowned. What's this? The Adeyemi Impact Gala. 3 nights from now? Halima's eyes moved across the page. Donors. Press. Board members. Ministers. Fashion editors. International partners. It was not merely a party. It was a stage large enough to bless succession-shape headlines and erase inconvenient truths beneath polished speeches. Tunde will use it, Halima said. He intends to. Madame Nala replied. He has already circulated language positioning himself as guardian of legacy through stability. And me, if he can, he will turn you into a private matter. A tragic claimant requiring care, discretion, and further verification. Halima understood immediately. Keep her close enough to control, far enough to silence. Not daughter. Case. Not heir. Complication. She looked again at the still frame. Tunde by the SUV. Solomon Benza nearby. Rain. Chaos. Calculation. Then she saw it, not just what they had done, but the shape of what they expected. They expected confusion, gratitude, delay, shame. They expected her to enter wealth as a supplicant. They had no idea what it meant to survive poverty without surrendering memory. Halima set the guest list down. I want Mama Asha moved again. She already has been, Madam Nala said. An hour ago. Relief punched through Halima so suddenly it hurt. And I want copies of everything. You'll have them. I want to know exactly who on that board hated my father enough to let his brother become this. Madam Nala's eyes darkened. That, she said, is the right question. A knock came at the door. Both women froze. Madam Nala stepped soundlessly to the side, one hand slipping inside her jacket. Halima felt absurdly for a weapon she did not have. The knock came again, softer this time. Halima, a male voice said through the door. It's Jabari. You need to see this now. Madam Nala opened the door only halfway. Jabari stood in the corridor, tie-loosened face pale with controlled alarm phone in hand. What Madam Nala asked. He looked at Halima, not at Nala. It's already leaking, he said. Someone tipped the media. And there's something else. He turned the phone screen toward them. A news blog headline blazed across it in bold letters. Mystery woman claims Adeyemi. Bloodline sources question her past, mother, and motives. Below the headline was a grainy still image from the reunion. Halima in the center of the courtyard. Paper cup in hand. Zuena smiling just outside the frame. For one suspended second, the whole strategy changed shape. They were not waiting for the gala anymore. The war had already begun. By 9 o'clock the next evening, the ballroom of the Adeyemi Impact Gala looked like a kingdom built to convince the world that goodness could be purchased in evening wear. Crystal light poured down from chandeliers the size of small cars. Gold-edged tables curved across the hall in perfect symmetry. A string quartet played near a stage, framed by digital screens displaying scholarship numbers, hospital donations, and smiling children whose pain had been turned into elegant statistics. Men in tuxedos shook hands beneath banners about legacy and responsibility. Women in couture gowns moved like living declarations of access. Cameras flashed. Journalists murmured. Donors laughed too loudly. And under all that polished light, a war waited to be named. Halima stood in a private anteroom behind the stage, wearing a deep black gown Madam Nala had chosen for one reason only: it allowed no one to mistake her for a rescued victim. The dress was simple-structured and severe enough to make her look exactly what she had become over the last days, dangerous to anyone hoping she would be grateful and quiet. Jabari adjusted his cufflinks for the third time in 5 minutes. Stop doing that, Halima said. He dropped his hands at once. Sorry. He looked exhausted. The neat control she remembered from school had cracked under the strain of the last 24 hours. After the media leak, he had spent the night sealing document copies, filing injunction drafts, and tracing the source of the smear campaign that had painted Halima as an opportunist with a suspicious past and an unverified guardian mother. The language had been clinical enough to avoid legal exposure and filthy enough to do its job. 3 more blogs had repeated it by noon. By evening, the reunion video had resurfaced with selective editing. The part where Halima was mocked remained. The part where the luxury car stopped for her was clipped to look suggestive. Comments multiplied. Some defended her. Many did not. Public cruelty had gone digital now, faster, cleaner, harder to pin down. Jabari looked at her and said quietly, "You can still walk away." Halima almost smiled. "No, I know. I just needed to hear if you understood that. She held his gaze. I understand more than you think. That landed harder than the words sounded, because both of them knew what lay beneath it. He had been kind once. He had been decent in small moments. And when the larger moment came, when Zuena and the others had sharpened the room around Halima years ago, and again at the reunion, he had chosen safety. Even now he was helping her partly out of conscience, partly out of shame. Useful, yes. Forgiven, not yet. Madame Nala entered from the corridor with a tablet in one hand. We're moving now. Tunda has started the legacy address early. That means he knows Jabari said. He suspects Madame Nala corrected. Which is better? Panic ruins timing. Halima stepped toward her. Mama Asha secure. Guards rotated. New room. No outside access. Only then did Halima feel her lungs work properly again. Madame Nala handed Jabari the tablet. Board packets are live. External escrow is primed. If the signal fails, release goes automatic. Jabari nodded once. Halima had learned to appreciate how rich people prepared for truth, not with courage, but with layered insurance. The music beyond the doors softened. On the monitor in this corner, Tunda Adeyemi appeared on stage, beneath a giant illuminated image of his late brother Mosi. Applause spread through the hall as Tunda reached the podium in a midnight suit and solemn expression, every inch the guardian of continuity. Even through the screen, Halima could see the genius of the performance. He did not look like a usurper. He looked like a grieving steward, a man holding a family, a company, and a philanthropic empire together against chaos. He began in a low, grave voice. Tonight we honor vision, service, family. The values that built this institution before profit ever touched it. Halima let out one quiet breath through her nose. Liar, but a skillful one. He spoke of Mosi as a brother, of sacrifice, of legacy, of the duty to carry forward what the dead could no longer protect themselves. It was almost enough to make a stranger weep. Halima looked at the screen and felt something new settle inside her. Not fear, not even rage now, but clarity, sharpened into purpose. He had stolen too much from her to keep the language of family. Madame Nala touched her arm once. When he says the phrase, secure future, we move. Why then? Because he intends that as the transition cue. He'll announce governance continuity before questions can begin. The ballroom monitor showed the front tables. Ministers, luxury investors, board members, charity chairs, foreign partners, Kelechi beside Zuena. Both composed. Kelechi's face was unreadable. Zuena's was worse serene. Too serene. Her diamond flashed each time she applauded. She had dressed tonight in white again, as if innocence could be tailored. Tunda's voice rose. And in uncertain times, what matters most is the courage to protect a secure future for those who depend on us. Madame Nala said, How? The anteroom door opened. The sound of the ballroom hit them at once. Clinking glass, polite applause, the soft hum of prestige. Halima walked forward between Jabari and Madame Nala, not rushing, not hesitating. 3 steps from the stage entrance, 2 security men moved to block the passage. Madame Nala spoke before they could. Stand down, one hesitated. The other glanced toward the stage manager who had just recognized Halima from the media leak and gone pale. Jabari held up his phone with a legal hold notice already displayed, voice clipped and cold. Obstruction now becomes personal liability. Money loved legality more than truth. The guards moved. Tunda was just reaching the end of his sentence when Halima stepped into the light. The ballroom changed in one visible wave. First confusion, then recognition, then shock so complete it silenced even the photographers. She walked straight toward the stage, black fabric cutting through gold light, face calm, spine straight. The entire room forced to watch the woman They had begun smearing before ever hearing speak. Tunde's hand tightened on the podium. That was the only outward sign he had lost control. Kelechi rose halfway from his chair. Zuena did not move at all, which was how Halima knew she was terrified. Halima reached the stage stairs and mounted them without asking permission. The quartet had stopped playing. Somewhere in the back, a glass broke. Tunde recovered enough to speak first. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said. Smile strained but functional. "I apologize. There appears to be a misunderstanding." "No," Halima said, her voice carrying farther than she expected. "There has been a misunderstanding for 22 years. That sentence snapped the room into complete silence. Madame Nala had already reached the side control panel. One of the giant screens behind Tunde flickered, then changed. The smiling charity children vanished. In their place appeared the still frame from the crash scene. Rain. Wreckage. Black SUV. Tunde beside it. Solomon Bensa nearby. An audible murmur rolled through the hall. Tunde turned, saw the image, and for the first time lost the mask entirely. It lasted less than a second, but everyone saw it. Everyone important, at least. And powerful rooms never forgot the first expression a man wears when truth touches him uninvited. "What is this?" he demanded. Jabari answered from below the stage. Preserved evidence attached to dormant transport files and settlement records. Another screen lit up payment trails, shell companies, silent retainers. A third showed the legal transfer chart. A fourth headlines from the morning smear campaign beside metadata links now traced to a communications subcontractor connected through Solomon Bensa's foundation office. The ballroom was no longer a gala. It was a tribunal in evening wear. Tunde stepped from behind the podium. "This is outrageous. Unverified. Manipulated. Madame Nala, you are exceeding every boundary of your role." Madame Nala's voice cut through the room like glass. "My role ended the moment you mistook murder for governance." Gasps broke out. One board member stood. Another sat back down too quickly. Cameras began flashing in violent bursts, now no longer decorative but hungry. Tunde pointed toward Halima. "This woman has been coached into a fantasy by people who want access to family assets." "Her so-called guardian, my mother," Halima said. "And the microphone caught the steel in it, saved me when men near you decided I should not be found." The room shifted again. Not guardian. Mother. Saved me. Words mattered, especially against men like Tunde, who depended on making everything procedural. He laughed then, but there was panic under it. "Emotion is not evidence." "Then listen to evidence," Halima said. Jabari pressed a control on the tablet. The audio recording filled the ballroom. Static first. Then Zuena's distorted voice. "I told you she should have disappeared years ago." People turned visibly toward her table. Kelechi went still. The male reply followed. "She was nothing until your family dragged her out of nowhere." Then Zuena again. "Then make sure blood is not enough." When the recording ended, the silence felt almost holy. Zuena stood too quickly, chair scraping hard across the floor. "That's fake." No one answered immediately, because even people willing to excuse cruelty had trouble excusing that sentence. Kelechi looked at her as if he were seeing architecture collapse in real time. "Tell me that isn't your voice." She turned to him, eyes filling with instant tears, so skillful. Halima would once have admired them. "They're twisting everything. I was scared. I didn't know what was happening. Your father said—" And there it was. The first crack between them. Tunde's head snapped toward her. Too late. The board heard it. "Your father said." Jabari did not let the moment die. "There is more," he said, and the DNA confirmation appeared on the central screen. Chain of custody validated, independent lab seals, visible names redacted except for the relevant conclusion. Probability of biological relation between subject H and the late Mozi Adeyemi, 99.998%. The number hit the room like thunder. Several board members began speaking at once. Journalists surged to the side aisles. Security no longer knew whom to protect from whom. Kelechi sat down slowly, face emptied. Zuena backed one step away from the table, then another, as if distance might undo exposure. Tunda raised his voice, but it had lost authority now. "This process is compromised. I demand you demand," Halima said. He looked at her, and for the first time in his life, perhaps a woman he had planned around rather than reckoned with, looked back without fear. "You had 22 years, Halima said, every word clean and hard. You had enough power to search, enough power to pay, enough power to silence, enough power to reward men who stood beside you in the rain while a child disappeared. And now you want time. Process dignity." The last word cut deepest, because dignity was what he had denied her first. Below the stage, one of the oldest board trustees rose with visible fury. "Tunde," he said, voice shaking, "tell me right now whether you concealed a potential heir and diverted company resources to bury it." Tunde did not answer fast enough. That was answer enough. Another trustee turned to security. "Do not let him leave." The ballroom detonated into movement. Voices, flashing cameras, reporters shouting questions. Kelechi pulling his arm away when Zuena grabbed for him. Zuena saying his name again and again. One minister walking out, another pretending he had never supported Tunde's governance memo. Money, as Halima had learned, did not love truth, but it loved losing exposure even less. Tunde looked around the room and finally understood what had happened. He had not merely been accused, he had been left without the protection of unanimous disbelief. And in rooms like this, that was the beginning of the end. By sunrise, the headlines had changed. Not all of them. Some still clung to scandal because scandal sold faster than justice. But the center had shifted. What had begun as a smear against a mystery woman was now a governance crisis, an inheritance scandal, a corruption investigation, and the public collapse of one of the most polished families in the country. Commentators who had mocked Halima's past 12 hours earlier were suddenly debating suppressed heirs' elite impunity and the price poor people paid when powerful men treated bloodlines like property. The world had not become moral overnight. It had only become interested. Halima learned quickly that public sympathy was not the same as peace. The morning after the gala, the Adami estate no longer felt like a house pretending to be calm. It felt like a machine after impact, still standing, still expensive, but full of hidden fractures. Lawyers arrived before breakfast. Board members requested emergency calls. Staff walked more quietly. Doors closed faster. No one mentioned Tunde directly, yet everyone behaved like a fire had passed through the structure and might return at any moment. By noon, the board had suspended him from all executive authority pending full investigation. By 2, Solomon Bensa had released a statement calling himself an innocent historical associate whose reputation was being weaponized by opportunistic agendas. By 4, Kelechi Adeyemi had ended his engagement. That last development reached Halima not through gossip, but because Zuena came to see her. Madame Nulla wanted her turned away. Halima said no. The meeting took place in a smaller receiving room on the east side of the estate, away from the press line at the gates and away from the board lawyers moving like vultures through the main halls. Halima stood by the window when Zuena entered, and for one suspended second, memory tried to overlay itself on the present 2 girls in uniforms, passing notes, sharing secrets, still young enough to believe that affection could survive class. Then the real woman stepped into full light. Zuena did not look ruined. Women like her were trained too well for that. But she looked damaged. Her hair was perfect, her clothes expensive. Her face carefully made, but something in the way she held her shoulders had changed. She was no longer entering rooms expecting them to flatter her. "I only need 5 minutes," she said. Halima did not invite her to sit. Then use them honestly. Zuvaina laughed once, but there was no cruelty in it now, only bitterness. You always did know how to choose a knife for the exact moment. You handed me enough. That stung. It should have. Zuvaina looked down briefly, then up again. I came to say, I never thought it would go this far. Halima felt nothing at those words. Not because she was heartless, because some sentences arrived too late to reach the wound they were meant for. The reunion, Halima asked. The lies, the recording, helping a man who wanted me erased. Which part surprised you? Zuvaina's throat moved. I was trying to survive too. The room went quiet. There it was, the one excuse almost every betrayer eventually offered. Survival, as if the word cleaned blood from choices. Halima crossed her arms slowly. No, you were trying to win. Zuvaina flinched. For the first time since Halima had known her, she did not rush to cover the hit with pride. She let it land. Maybe, she said. Maybe I stopped seeing the difference. Halima believed that, which did not soften anything. Zuvaina stepped closer, but not too close. My father told me years ago there had been an incident, that certain histories should remain buried because they protected stability. Later, when your name resurfaced, he told me to stay away from you. Then Tunda started asking questions. Then I understood enough to know that if you were real, everything could change. Everything for whom? For me, Zuvaina said. And at least this time there was no disguise on it. For my family. For the life I built. Built, Halima thought. On what? On whom? Zuvaina's voice grew quieter. Do you know what it is to grow up watching doors close because your father was 1 tier too low, 1 degree too rough, 1 favor too dirty? To understand that elegance is just a test you keep taking until rich people stop calling you temporary. Halima looked at her, and because she was honest even inside her anger, she answered the truth inside herself. Yes, in another shape, through another wound. But yes, that was what made betrayal ache most. Not that Zuvaina was alien to pain, but that she had translated her pain into contempt for someone easier to step on. You knew what they did to me, Halima said, and you joined them. Zuvaina closed her eyes. I know. No, you know now because it cost you something. That ended it. Zuvaina did not cry. She was too proud, even broken. But she looked suddenly tired in a way wealth could not disguise. I'm sorry, she said. Halima listened to the words and found that forgiveness was not waiting there like a soft miracle. It was not ready. Perhaps it would never take the shape Zuvaina wanted. Some apologies repaired nothing. They only marked the place where truth had finally arrived. I believe you mean it, Halima said. Zuvaina looked up sharply, almost hopeful. Halima finished the sentence. And it changes almost nothing. The hope died properly this time. A few seconds later, Zuvaina nodded once. Fair. She turned to leave, then stopped at the door. For what it's worth, he was afraid of you before he ever saw you. Tunda. Yes? Zuvaina kept her back to the room. Not because you were powerful, because you were proof. Then she left. Halima stood alone for a long time after that, staring through the tall glass at a garden designed to look natural and failing beautifully. Proof. The word stayed with her. Not miracle, not destiny. Proof. That a child had been hidden, that a lie had been fed for decades, that poor women often kept history alive with nothing but memory and stubbornness, while rich men built walls around forgetting. By evening, the board had done what boards always did when terrified turned morality into procedure. An emergency session confirmed the DNA findings, recognized Halima as the biological daughter of Mosi Adeyemi, and appointed an interim legacy trust arrangement, pending criminal and civil findings in the wider case. Lawyers explained things in careful language. Advisors spoke of continuity stabilization, fiduciary duty, reputational recovery. News networks celebrated the dramatic return of an heir as though she had emerged from a screenplay rather than a lifetime of deprivation. Halima signed only what Madame Nalla approved. Nothing more. When the cameras requested a statement, she declined. When consultants suggested a soft-focus family interview, she refused. When a branding team proposed a healing legacy campaign, Madame Nalla nearly had them removed from the grounds. On the third day after the gala, Halima left the estate, in the same black luxury car that had first silenced the reunion courtyard. But this time she was not going to a trap. She was going to Mama Asha. The private medical wing sat on a hill above the city, quiet and bright with clean air and walls painted in colors meant to calm people who had known too much fear. Armed security stayed discreetly outside. Inside the room smelled faintly of antiseptic and lemongrass. Machines monitored what money could now finally treat properly. Sunlight pooled across the blanket folded over Mama Asha's knees. The old woman looked stronger already. Still fragile, still thin, still far too willing to insult doctors, but stronger. When Halima entered, Mama Asha narrowed her eyes immediately. "You are wearing rich people's sadness." Halima laughed before she could stop herself. "There," Mama Asha said. "That is better. Sit down before you start looking expensive and tragic at the same time." Halima crossed the room and took her hand. For a moment, neither spoke. They had survived the worst of the wave, but survival was not simple after truth. Love had to reorganize itself around revelation. Trust had to be rebuilt in places where fear had once stood guard. Yet as Halima sat there with the hand that had rescued her from a ditch and raised her through scarcity, one thing was perfectly clear. No test, no board, no bloodline could undo motherhood lived in action. "They want me to move into the main residence," Halima said. Mama Asha made a face. "Why?" "So I can be visible when useful and protected when inconvenient," Mama Asha said. "A decorative hostage." Halima smiled. "Something like that. And what did you tell them? That I'll keep a residence if required for legal reasons. But home is different." Mama Asha squeezed her fingers once. "Good girl." Halima looked down, fighting the sudden sting in her eyes. "I'm going to set up a foundation," she said after a while. "Not one of their vanity things. A real one. Scholarships for girls pushed out of schools by fees, shame, pregnancy. Rumors, class politics. Emergency medical support for guardians raising children they did not give birth to but chose anyway. Legal aid where inheritance and identity get buried under power." Mama Asha was quiet for a long time. Then she asked, "And will it have some terrible grand name with marble somewhere?" Halima let out a soft laugh. "No. Good. Marble is for dead men and bad taste. It will carry your name." That silenced the room. Mama Asha stared at her. Then she looked away too quickly, pretending to fuss with the blanket. "Nonsense." "No," Halima said. "Truth." The older woman's mouth trembled once. "I cannot read English legal papers properly, and you want foundations in my name." "You can read people," Halima said. "That has always been more useful." Mama Asha's eyes filled, then, though she still tried to hide it, with irritation. "You speak like a child who has recently acquired funding." Halima laughed through her own tears this time. Outside the window, the late sun turned the city gold. Inside, the future settled not like fantasy, but like work. There would be hearings, investigations, appeals, men trying to salvage influence, commentators moving on and then returning when scandal sharpened again. Tunde would fight. Solomon Bensa would lie. The company would need cleaning from the inside out. None of it would be simple. But simplicity was for people who had been protected from life. Halima rose when it was time to leave for the trust briefing. Mama Asha refused help sitting straighter, then demanded help anyway when she dropped her spoon. The ordinary tenderness of it nearly broke Halima's heart. At the door, she turned back. Mama Asha was watching her with that same fierce, stubborn love that had once pulled a half-conscious child from thorn bushes and chosen danger over abandonment. Halima walked back, bent down, and kissed her forehead. Then she left. The clinic stepped into the waiting luxury car and sat as the driver closed the door. The city moved beyond the glass. Somewhere behind her, an old life still ached. Somewhere ahead, power waited with papers, cameras, and expectations. Halima rested one hand over the pendant at her throat and looked forward. The first time she stepped into a billion-dollar car, people thought the shock was the story. They were wrong. The real story was what came after, not revenge, not rescue, but a woman no longer willing to let the world decide whether her pain would make her small. And this time, when the car pulled into the gates of the future waiting for her, Halima did not enter as a rumor, a scandal, or a hidden child. She entered as herself. What makes a person valuable is not the house they were born into, the clothes they wear, or the doors that open for them in public. It is the truth they carry when life gives them every reason to become bitter, cruel, or ashamed. Halima's journey reminds us that some of the strongest people in this world are not the ones protected by wealth, but the ones who survive humiliation without losing their humanity. She was mocked, hidden, underestimated, and nearly erased, yet the deepest power she discovered was not in money or bloodline. It was in courage, memory, dignity, and the ability to choose love over revenge. This story also reminds us that family is not only about blood. Sometimes the person who truly saves your life is the one who chooses you when they have nothing to gain and everything to lose. Love like that is sacred, and in the end, justice is not only about exposing evil, it is also about healing what was broken, honoring those who sacrificed in silence, and becoming the kind of person who uses pain to build a better future for others. If this story touched your heart, tell me what stayed with you the most. Was it Halima's strength, Mama Asha's sacrifice, or the moment truth finally defeated power? Share your thoughts in the comments and tell me your country and local time, too. And if you love powerful emotional stories about justice, hidden truths, and healing, subscribe and stay with me for the next journey.